The USB sat cold in my hand as I stood before the school board, their eyes cautious, curious, and already calculating. I didn't flinch. I didn't tremble. I simply said, "This is what happened," and pressed play. The projector flickered, a hallway blurred with motion, laughter. Then the shove. My face sat clear from memory, light, mocking, surgical, as the blur in every photo. Another cut. Me at the assembly, frozen in place while a room full of people laughed at her joke. Then the locker room, Mason stepping closer, pain flashing white. And then, me now, upright, unshaken. They were much it all unfold. The footage ended. I looked at them, not as a victim, but as someone who refused to be invisible any longer. They tried to erase me. This is what happened instead. My name is Kate Bran, and this is the moment they finally saw me. My name is Kate Bran. I'm 17, a senior at Columbia Falls High School, and I've spent most of my life trying not to be seen, not because I didn't want attention, but because attention never ended well for me. I wasn't popular, I wasn't bullied, I was just invisible. A blur in the background of every photo, the kid teachers called quiet but capable, the one classmates forgot to tag in group projects. I carried a camera everywhere, not to capture memories, but to feel like I existed behind the lens. It made life easier, safer. I grew up in the shadow of my sister Kalista. She was everything I wasn't. Loud, beautiful, polished, magnetic. People didn't just notice her, they followed her. Teachers praised her, parents admired her, strangers complimented her in the grocery store. And me, I was Kalista's sister, the one in Hannah Mow Down, the one who didn't need help or hugs or space to speak. There were moments, early on, when I tried to step forward. My 10th birthday, I wore a yellow dress I'd picked myself. I remember standing beside the cake, waiting for someone to say I looked nice. But Kalista had just won a spelling bee that day, and the entire dinner was about her. I blew out the candles while she recited vocabulary words. No one noticed I hadn't made a wish. Another year, I drew a portrait of our family for a school project. My art teacher called it impressive and told me to show my parents. I handed it to my mom after dinner. She looked at it for 3 seconds before saying, "You made Kalista's hair too flat." That paper ended up under a stack of junk mail on the kitchen counter. No one ever mentioned it again. It wasn't that they hated me. That would have been easier. They just forgot I was there, unless they needed something. I learned to be useful, to smile politely, to disappear without making anyone uncomfortable. I told myself it was love in a quieter form. That being ignored was better than being resented. By high school, I had stopped trying to belong. I knew my place. Kalista ruled the school, homecoming queen, debate captain, student council president. She curated her life like a highlight reel. And I stayed behind the curtain. I ate lunch alone most days, not out of choice, but inevitability. Teachers praised my essays, but never asked how I was doing. Even the guidance counselor once told me, "You're like steady water, Kate. Steady, reliable." What she didn't understand was that still water drowns just as deep as any wave. My silence wasn't peace, it was protection. I thought if I stayed small enough, I wouldn't make waves. I thought, if I never asked for more, I'd be safe. But I was wrong. 'Cause eventually, even silence runs out of room. Eventually, someone will push too far. Eventually, you realize being invisible doesn't keep you from harm. It just makes people think they can hurt you without consequence. And that's exactly what happened. Until the day I stopped hiding. Until I turned my camera lens around and pointed it straight at the truth. Kalista Bran didn't walk through the school. She floated. Every hallway bent around her. She didn't just lead, she choreographed. Homecoming queen, student council president, debate champion, charity ambassador, she was the kind of girl who made everyone feel like they were in her presence instead of just a room. People didn't just admire her, they echoed her. Whatever Kalista laughed at, the school found funny. Whatever she wore, people copied. And whatever she ignored, that was me. At the academic recognition assembly, I sat halfway back in the gym. They called names for perfect attendance, math awards, leadership honors. Most clapped politely. Then Principal Coleman called Kalista to the stage. A roar of applause. She took the mic with polished ease, thanking her classmates and teachers. Then she turned to the crowd and said, "Oh, and to my sister Kate, thanks for always being supportive, and for photobombing half my high school career. She's the blur in every background shot." The room erupted in laughter. Students, teachers, even the janitor chuckled. I sat frozen. My fingers clenched around the strap of my camera bag. The laugh didn't die quickly. It lingered, stretched out like they were waiting for me to react. I didn't. I stared straight ahead, as if I were somewhere else. That night at dinner, I thought maybe someone would say something, not to defend me, just to acknowledge it happened. My mom reheated leftover pasta. My dad scrolled through emails on his phone. Kalista walked in late, glowing from applause. "So proud of you, sweetie," my mom said, touching her wrist. "You've got charm. That joke about your sister, classic." I blinked. "I didn't think it was funny," I said quietly. Kalista rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Kate. Don't be dramatic." It embarrassed me. My mom sighed. "Honey, it was just a joke. You're too sensitive sometimes." I opened my mouth, closed it. The words clawed at my throat, but I knew they'd land nowhere. I took my plate to the sink, washed it, dried it, and walked away. No one stopped me. No one followed. Later that night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling while the hallway light glowed under my door like a lie. I thought back to being 8 years old, hiding behind the Christmas tree because Kalista said my dress made me look cheap. I thought staying quiet was strength, that swallowing pain made me more mature. But in that moment, after the assembly, after the dinner, something in me cracked, not from hurt, but from clarity. They weren't going to protect me. Not Kalista, not my parents, not the teachers who laughed. And maybe silence didn't make me safe. Maybe it made me a target. That was the night I stopped waiting for someone to defend me. That was the night I started wondering what it would look like if I defended myself. It was 2 days after the assembly when it happened. I arrived early for volleyball practice, hoping to steal a few quiet moments in the locker room before the rest of the team arrived. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead echoed in the stillness. I liked the quiet. Then the door creaked shut again behind them, sealing me in. I didn't have to look. I already knew. Mason's voice cut through the space like a smirk in sound. "Told you she'd be here early. Girl's a creature of habit." He wasn't alone. 2 of his friends followed, both in team hoodies, both wearing the look of boys who had never been told no. I moved toward the exit, slow and silent, but Mason stepped in front of me. "Leaving so soon?" he said, his hue flashing uselessly. "Kalista says you're a little too full of yourself lately. Thought we'd help you see your place." I said nothing. I kept my eyes down. That was a mistake. One of them slammed his hand against the locker next to my head. I flinched. My shoulder hit metal. Mason leaned in closer, voice low and nearly bored. "You don't belong here, and you sure as hell don't belong in her world." Then he grabbed my wrist. Hard. My other hand swung to push him away, but he shoved me. My back hit the corner of a locker with a crack that felt like lightning through my face. A sharp edge cut into the skin just above my eye. The world spun. I dropped, my legs folding beneath me. Warm blood slid down my cheek as the door slammed again behind our laughter. I didn't know how long I sat there, breath shallow, body curled on the tile, my vision blurred with more than blood. I couldn't cry. I couldn't speak. Then I heard it. "Kate." It was Sarah. She dropped her gym bag and knelt beside me. "Oh my God, your face." She reached for her phone. I shook my head. "Paper towels," I whispered. "Just please." She didn't ask again. Later, in the nurse's office, I lied. said I slipped, said it was an accident. The nurse raised an eyebrow but didn't press. That night, as I lay in bed, the knock came. Kalista stepped in without waiting. She closed the door behind her, arms folded. "I heard you were being dramatic again," she said. My cheek throbbed, the swelling already forming. "You're not going to ruin my senior year." "Got it?" Her voice was calm, cold. She left without waiting for a response. And that's when I knew. She sent him. It hadn't been random. It hadn't been a mistake. It was a message, and I heard it loud and clear. She wanted me to stay invisible, to remember my place. But something inside me finally snapped. I wasn't going to vanish, not this time. Sarah didn't let it go. The next morning, she pulled me aside between classes and said, "We're going to the principal's office." "Now," I followed, numb. Principal Coleman looked up as we entered, barely hiding his disinterest. Sarah spoke first. "By Mason Jackson, 2 other boys." Coleman turned to me. "You were the one injured?" I nodded slowly. "Do you know who it was?" My voice barely carried, but I said their names clearly. Mason, Tyler, Ethan. At Mason's name, Coleman's eyes narrowed, just slightly. "Mason Jacks? The quarterback?" I nodded again. He leaned forward. "Are you sure you're not exaggerating? Sometimes things are misunderstood." My stomach twisted. Sarah's voice rose. "He slammed her into a locker. There's nothing to misunderstand." Coleman cleared his throat. "Let me call in your sister." 2 minutes later, Kalista walked in, polished and poised. "Is something wrong?" Coleman gestured for her to sit. "We've had an accusation involving Mason Shex." Kalista's face shifted into well-reheated shock. "Mason? That's insane. He was with me after practice. We were studying." She turned to me. "Are you okay, Odie? You must have hit your head worse than we thought." I didn't look at her. If I did, I might scream. Coleman nodded slowly. "I'll follow up with the boys. For now, return to class." Sarah was furious. "She's lying, and you're letting her," I whispered. "I know." Later that day, I passed Coach Harvin near the faculty lounge. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He'd seen Mason and the others near the locker room, but when asked, all he said was, "Just some kids." Didn't see much. Didn't want it to accuse the star quarterback. At dinner, my mother brought it up like she was talking about a misplaced sock. "Principal Coleman said you're accusing Mason of something serious." My dad didn't even glance up from his plate. "The school says there's no proof," my mother added. "Kalista said Mason left early. Maybe you misunderstand." I stared at my plate. "And that makes sense to you?" I asked. My father set down his fork. "Let's not jeopardize Kalista's future over a misunderstanding. Her future. Not my injury. Not the bruises forming on my face." I stood, washed my dish, and left the table. That night, I drafted an email to the school board. Every detail, every bruise, even a photo Sarah had taken. But I didn't send it. I stared at the screen and deleted the message. Then I opened a blank document and typed, "This is what happened to me." I saved it. The next day, in the library, I was in the back aisle when I overheard 2 boys laughing. "Mason's lucky he didn't get caught," one said. Freaking show-off, doing that near a hallway cam. I froze. The hallway camera, right outside the locker room. That was it. Something shifted. I began documenting everything. Screenshots, timestamps, notes, photos. I wanted facts, evidence, truth. Then, late that night, a message arrived. On a number, "You're not the only one." Attached was a video. Mason leaning against a car, laughing. One shove. That's all it took. Freaking blur. Another message followed. I should have sent this sooner. I hadn't heard in years. She offered to meet. Said she had the original file. The next day, She handed me a USB because you were bleeding and nobody said anything. I didn't cry. I didn't thank her. I just held the drive like it was the start of something I couldn't ignore anymore. The next few days moved with purpose. I stopped waiting for someone to believe me and started building what they couldn't ignore. I gathered everything: screenshots of Mason's posts, photos Sarah had taken of my bruised face, copies of Kalista's comments online, and Rosen's video of Mason bragging in the parking lot. I printed Kalista's comment on Mason's post, the one that read, "Bless her fragile little heart," and taped it inside my locker. Not to hide it, but to remember. I stopped flinching when I saw them in the hallway. Kalista still floated through the crowd, but fewer people followed. Mason still acted untouchable, but cracks had started to show. People whispered more now. And I stood taller. One day between classes, I passed the gym corridor and saw Ethan, Mason's friend, cornering a freshman girl, Tallis, near the trophy case. Her backpack strap was clenched in his fist. She was frozen. I didn't hesitate. I walked straight up, stepped between them, and said firmly, "We're just talking." I didn't blink. You heard me. He stared for a second too long, then stepped back. Tallis exhaled in relief. I walked her to class in silence. That afternoon, I found a folded note in my locker. No name, just 4 words. "You saved me. Don't stop." After that, things moved quickly. I received an email from the school board. "You've been granted 10 minutes to present your statement and supporting materials." Friday, room 206. I didn't feel nervous. I felt ready. Friday came. The boardroom was small, square, filled with water bottles and tension. Kalista sat beside my parents, both dressed like they were attending a scholarship interview. Mason sat next to her, blazer stiff, hair slicked back. They didn't look at me. I took my seat across from them and placed the USB on the table. "Kate, you have 10 minutes, Miss Calder," the board chair said. I stood. My voice didn't shake. "This is what I lived. You decide if it deserves silence," I inserted the USB and hit play. The projector screen flickered. The grainy footage showed the hallway, then the door, then me, Mason shoving, the sound of metal, my body collapsing. Then their laughter. Then the exit door slamming shut. No one spoke when the clip ended. Mason looked down. Kalista's face was unreadable. I didn't give them time to spin it. Sarah's written statement was read aloud. She was bleeding and I panicked, but she didn't cry. She asked for paper towels. Then Rosen's. I gave her the video because I couldn't watch someone lie their way out of the truth anymore. And Coach Harvin's eye. I didn't speak because I was scared of losing my job. That's not an excuse. Kalista opened her mouth once, but no words came out. Mason leaned back like he'd already lost. My mother looked down at her lap. My father pressed his lips tight. Miss Calder looked at her fellow board members, then spoke again. "We've reached a decision. Mason Jax is suspended for 30 school days. Immediate removal from all team roles and athletic privileges. Kalista. Bran placed on academic probation, pending investigation into collusion and intimidation of a peer. And finally, the initiation of a student-led anti-bullying committee with open participation for students and staff." The room was quiet, no applause, just understanding. I didn't stay for what came next. I stood, pocketed the USB, and walked out. This wasn't revenge, it was release. I passed the front office and rounded the corner just as Mason stepped into view. He didn't yell, he just looked at me and said, "This isn't over." I met his eyes. "You're right," I said. "It's just finally begun." I didn't wait for him to respond. I didn't need his words anymore. Mine were enough, and the world had finally heard them. Monday came, and the school felt different. Not quieter, just less fake. Mason was gone. There was no school-wide announcement, no public apology. but his name was missing from the attendance sheet. His locker cleared out over the weekend. Whispers floated around that his parents had transferred him to another district to avoid further escalation. Everyone knew what that meant. They didn't want consequences. They wanted a reset, but the damage was already done. Kalista stayed. Her steps were smaller now, her circle quieter. She wasn't swarmed by followers in the halls anymore. Even her laugh, once constant, had disappeared. That Monday morning, I passed her by the cafeteria. She looked at me, just a glance, and then looked away. There were no more words left between us. Maybe there never were. A week later, I was called into Ms. Calder's office. She handed me a printed form with a small smile. "We're establishing a student-led reform committee on harassment and bullying prevention. We'd like you to be part of it." I looked down at the form. It wasn't validation. It was a beginning. I signed it. When the public community forum was announced, I submitted my name to speak. It was held in the school auditorium, the same one where Kalista had made her joke in front of everyone. This time, the room was full, but no one was laughing. I walked to the mic with steady steps. My voice was clear. I called me a blur. I believed it, until I bled. I let the silence settle. What happened to me in that locker room wasn't just an incident. It was the result of years of being erased in small, polite ways, of being asked to stay quiet, to be understanding, to protect someone else's future by sacrificing my own safety. I paused and scanned the room. My parents sat in the third row. My mother clutched her bag tightly. My father stared straight ahead, his jaw rigid. I looked past them. "I'm not here for revenge," I continued. "I'm here to speak for everyone who's ever been told they were too sensitive, everyone who was made to feel invisible. I'm here to say, we don't have to stay quiet. We don't have to stay small." The applause didn't come right away. It wasn't loud, but it was real. A month later, the youth gallery opened its autumn showcase. I submitted a photo series called Blur No More. Each photo told a story of silence, survival, visibility reclaimed. One showed a younger version of me, half hidden in the background, of Kalista's graduation. Another showed shadows and reflections, pieces of a person trying to be seen. But the final image stood alone on the back wall. It was a self-portrait I had taken a week earlier, standing in soft light, camera in hand, facing forward. No blur, no backdrop, just me, centered and calm. I stood near it as visitors passed. Some nodded, a few asked quiet questions. Then Tallis appeared beside me. She looked at the final photo, took a deep breath, and said, "You still don't talk much." I smiled. "I don't need to anymore," I said. "Not when I know they're finally listening." She nodded. We stood there, side by side, letting the silence speak for us. I wasn't a blur anymore. I was the frame, the focus. And I had no plans of fading again. Kalista still walked the same halls, but nothing about her walk was the same. The bounce in her step was gone. Her shoulders, once pulled back with unshakable pride, now curved inward just slightly. She didn't move in clusters anymore. The girls who used to trail her like satellites now drifted away in different orbits. She sat alone at lunch. She stared at her phone more than she smiled. She didn't speak when we passed each other. She didn't have to. The silence was loud enough. I started receiving notes. Folded scraps of paper slipped into my locker. Anonymous, but real. "Thank you for standing up. You made me feel braver. You're not the only one they tried to erase. One was from a freshman I never met. They bullied my brother until he quit school. I wish he had someone like you back then." I kept every note in a small envelope taped behind my dresser. At home, things didn't shift with the same clarity. My parents were quieter. My father lingered a little longer before leaving for work. My mother stopped asking me to be more understanding. One afternoon, I found a note on my desk in her handwriting. "We didn't protect you. We're trying to learn how." It was something. I didn't throw it away either. I folded it carefully and placed it in the same envelope with the others. There was no big moment where everything healed, no applause when I woke up each day. But I felt the shift in smaller ways. Teachers made eye contact. Classmates didn't flinch at my name. A group of juniors invited me to speak to their photography club. The librarian smiled and asked if I'd help design a new anti-bullying bulletin board. I said yes. Not because I wanted recognition, but because I finally felt worthy of taking up space. And then there was me. The inner space I used to shrink to fit. The part of me that used to whisper, "Don't make noise. Don't draw attention. Don't exist too loudly." That voice was still there, faint, but now it had to compete with something stronger. I walked down the same hallways, past the same lockers, through the same doors, but for the first time, I wasn't looking down. I wasn't pretending not to notice the world. I wasn't afraid to be seen. I didn't need validation from Kalista, or an apology from Mason, or even full understanding from my parents. What I needed, I had given myself. A voice, a truth, and the courage to hold on to both. I saw myself clearly now, not as a blur in someone else's story, but as the author of my own. And no one could erase me again. They called me a blur. But I didn't fade. I focused. For years, I believed that being invisible was the safest way to exist. That if I stayed quiet, if I stayed small, they'd leave me alone. But silence didn't protect me. It only gave them more room to hurt me. When I finally spoke, it wasn't to get revenge. It was to reclaim the truth that had been buried under other people's comfort and convenience. This isn't just about high school or bruises or hallway whispers. It's about what happens when we stop waiting to be saved and start saving each other. It's about what changes when someone finally says, "That wasn't okay," and others say, "Me too." I'm Kate Brand, and I didn't speak to destroy. I spoke to be whole. To make space for every kid like me who was laughed at, shoved aside, and told they were too much or not enough. If you've ever been silenced, overlooked, or erased, your story matters. You don't have to scream to be heard. Sometimes, the strongest voices are the ones that speak when everything tells them to stay quiet. Subscribe to Veiled Fury for more true stories of quiet power, bold truth, and justice that refuses to stay silent. Because being seen starts with being believed, and you are not alone.